Welcome back, you all, to CHD 208, Administration of Child Development Program. This is the lecture video for Chapter 3, which is entitled Licensing and Certification. So let's just get started. So child care center directors are responsible for understanding the licensing, understanding certification, and understanding regulations pertaining to services for young children. Each type of regulation is developed by a governmental body and has specific purposes. Directors must understand which regulations apply to their program and ensure that all requirements are fulfilled in a timely manner. When you're talking about regulation, there's become a lot more increase in regulations, and that is due to the expanded use of public funds and the broader acceptance of the fact that programs for young children must provide care and protection for children and be educationally sound. So also, educational accountability points to greater focus on the need for certifying or licensing the people responsible for the children's programs, while protection of children's health and safety requires licensing of centers. So typically, here's the deal. Mostly, if there's going to be more money, government money tied to something, there's going to be more regulations that come along with it, okay? So let's just get started. What's the purpose of licensing? Well, licensing of centers is typically required, but each state has its own regulations. So example of that would be as close as we are to the state of Georgia, I could own a center in Alabama and the regulations might be very different than the one right across the causeway in Georgia. For example, some states only require full-day child care programs to get a license, whereas in other states, all full-day, half-day, home-based programs must be licensed. So each state, you have to, whatever state you're going to open your daycare in, you've got to really look closely at those and not just go on something that you know from a previous state. If federal funding is involved, there's also going to be additional requirements that might come along. So you have to really look at that as well. The licensing function is a result of legislation, and its thrust and it is accountability for the health and safety of children and staff. So the main focus of licensing is the health and safety of the children. Licensing requirements are typically minimal, and enforced practices in some localities are somewhat limited. So as a result, program licensure does not guarantee quality care nor quality protection for children, and rarely does licensing address the educational quality of the program, and it does not govern curriculum selection. Okay, so basically a license is just giving permission to operate, but does not indicate quality. Okay, there is a trend towards recognizing pre-service training of staff in the area of early childhood development. And because we're beginning to see that trend, we are noticing that with quality programs and with licensing, the most important factor when you consider quality of programs is the staff's education and experience. And so we're going to get on into this chapter a little bit more as we keep going about a rating system, and that is why you're seeing so many daycares and programs within the state of Alabama really encouraging this staff education and experience, because we're beginning to equate that with the quality of the program, which is fantastic. So let's talk about licensing regulations. Local and state licensing regulations typically cover building safety and requirements for physical space, and also establish that teacher to child ratio, kind of a baseline for that. Although licensing regulations vary greatly from state to state, Most licensing regulations include all of these following points. So in building safety, we're mostly going to be talking about fire, sanitation, building safety standards, things like fire alarms, entrances and exits, making sure that they are safe, how you're going to transport infants who are non-ambulatory, meaning they can't walk. So what happens in the fire? Okay, so those are those building safety type of issues that licensing will address. Licensing will also address your physical space. Usually they specify the amount of space necessary for programs, and it varies amongst infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. And typically they're going to specify that amount of space in per square foot per, according to each child. Okay, so how much space per child in square feet do you need? And of course, that would, like I said, would differ between what you would need for an infant and what you would need for a preschooler. The next thing that licensing will do is teacher to child ratios. Although this is also different among state, most licensing standards are closer to the following guidelines that you see on your screen. So from infants 4 to 1, and then they take toddlers and divide them between 18-month-olds and 27-month-olds. The 4-year-olds are 10 to 1, the 5-year-olds 15 to 1. If you know Alabama DHR minimum standard guidelines, we are not necessarily in cahoot with that following guidelines right there. Ours are a little different than that, okay? But these ratios are there just to establish a baseline standard for, once again, like we said, with the focus of licensing is to protect the safety of the children. Staff qualifications. Like I said, we're really making a push in the state of Alabama and a lot of other states for staff qualifications. And we're going to talk about that in just a second a little bit further. But they're also, not only on staff are we talking about teachers, but we're talking about directors as well. So usually the director will require more than the teacher. So whatever the standard is for qualifications for the teacher, the directors will be just a little bit more. Usually they have to have a few, like some college training classes, but just a step up from what the teacher might have to have. And really, because of all of this, that is one of the reasons why it allows the director to make a little bit more money due to the credentialing, and then also, of course, the added responsibility. So if you are a program and you want to be and you are licensed and you're going to transport children, meaning you're going to drive them to and from places, you have to make sure that you meet these standards. So state motor vehicle department standards. So if we're in the state of Alabama, we're going to have to make sure that our whatever we transport them in, the driver, everything meets the Alabama motor vehicle standards. Okay, we have to use car seats and seat belts, and we have to have appropriate licensing and insurance coverage on our vehicle and through our center. So some other standards that we might see come into play if you serve infants. Okay, so if you have infants in your program, licensing is going to require you to have a detailed plan for diapering, including like what kind of surface. It goes right down to the type of surface that you can place the baby on while changing their diaper. What's your plan for disposing of soiled and wet diapers? It's very specific with that. And also hand washing by the staff after each diaper change. So in a lot of cases in older buildings, I have seen this happen. So in older buildings, they may have the infants in a room that might not have a hand washing station right next to the diapering area. So the staff member may change the baby in the diapering area and then have to walk over to another area to wash their hands. So that would kind of be a ding by the licensing specialist that comes around to kind of make sure you're meeting all the standards. And so you would probably have to put in a washing station right by your diapering station. So that's just an example of how licensing can work and what happens if you don't necessarily meet that standard, how you have to bring your program up to that standard. So accreditation, what's the difference? What's the difference between licensing and the difference between accreditation? So while licensing implies meeting minimum standards, accreditation is kind of like taking it a step up, okay? It implies performing at a higher level and meeting additional standards. So if you're asked what the difference between licensing and accreditation is, the main difference between those two, the main difference between licensing and accreditation is the difference in the standards and your performance to the standards, okay? So the main difference lies between the standards and their performance. So QRIS, that stands for Quality Rating and Improvement System. And what we're seeing is within the last 15 years, many states have implemented another approach to increasing the quality of early care and education programming. And they are called, most states have their own name for it, but it's all a quality rating and improvement system. And what that does is it brings about a systematic approach to assess, improve, and communicate the level of the quality of the program amongst that state. Right here in the state of Alabama, I'm proud to say that we are implementing a QRIS as well. Ours is called the Alabama Quality Stars Program. If you are familiar with daycares, you may see that they have that Quality Stars rating on their door. They proudly put that out there for all their parents to see, because it's just a way to show that they're working on quality, okay, and that they're working to improve the quality of the program that they offer to children, okay. Although the QRS provides like research, it's a research-based program. It provides a framework of the best practices that administrators and staff can use to evaluate and enhance their program. And then, like I said, it also lets the parent know, and it's kind of an indicator that they can use when selecting a program, a specific child care center for their child. Another thing I want to talk to you about, and this goes to the assignment that you're going to do this week, is career pathways. So credentialing is becoming more and more important indicators of in quality, okay, the type of credentials that you have. So very important in one's developing skill and competency. And as a result, they're now being included in many states' early childhood QRIS programs, okay? They're called ladders or lattices. So we call ours the Alabama Professional Development Lattice. And basically what it is it's a pathway that will provide you with clearly defined routes that you can use to enhance your qualifications, recognize professional possibilities that exist in the workforce, and then be compensated appropriately. So assignment number whatever that goes along with this chapter, I can't remember the assignment number, but it's going to ask you to go to the website of the Alabama Professional Development Lattice and really look closely at it. So when you're completing that assignment, make sure you go through all of those steps along our lattice so that you can see what happens as you begin to move up the rung, okay, as you're going up the ladder, so to speak, what you have to do as far as credentialing is concerned, but what that credentialing provides you. So thanks so much for joining me this week for chapter 3, and I look forward to seeing you all again next week.